They begged. They pleaded. Some of them are still messaging me, years later, for one thing: a recipe. Not a kidney. Not a loan. A recipe for brownies. And I have never, and will never, send it to them. Because those brownies weren't dessert. They were the final word in a war they didn't even know they'd started. If you've ever sat across from someone so smug, so certain of their own moral superiority that you wanted to scream, you're going to enjoy this one. This is a story about group projects, guilt trips, and the quiet, delicious satisfaction of holding something back. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to wish you had a recipe like mine to withhold from someone. Hit subscribe, get comfortable, and let's get into it. The setup. College group projects. 3 words that have probably given you a small, involuntary shudder. There's a special kind of dread that comes with being told you'll be graded on a project whose success depends entirely on people you didn't choose, can't fire, and are stuck with for the next several weeks. That was me, a few years back, sitting in a lecture hall as a professor read off group assignments like a judge handing down sentences. And when my name got called alongside 2 others, I felt a flicker of relief. Okay, 2 people. Manageable. I had no idea what I was walking into. The first meeting was fine. Polite, even. We exchanged numbers, talked about deadlines, and I remember thinking, this might actually be okay. That feeling lasted exactly until the second meeting, when I mentioned I'd grabbed a sandwich on my way over. Oh, one of them said, glancing at it like I'd pulled a dead rat out of my bag. I could never be okay with having a ham sandwich. I laughed it off. People have their preferences. No big deal. But it wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. Every meeting came with a side of quiet judgment, seasoned just enough to feel accidental. I mentioned I'd driven to campus because I was running late. Well, you should have cycled today instead of coming with your car. I ordered coffee. A raised eyebrow at the disposable cup. I existed, doing normal 20-something things, and every time I got this look. This look. The one that says I am better than you and I'm being so patient about it. Here's the thing about that kind of condescension. It doesn't hit you like a slap. It's not one big moment you can point to and say, that's when it happened. It's death by 1,000 tiny comments. Each one small enough that if you called it out, you'd be the one who looked unreasonable. I'm not judging you, they'd say, radiating judgment from every pore. And so you swallow it. Again and again. By the 3rd week, I noticed my shoulders would tense up the second I saw their names light up my phone. That's when you know something's gone wrong, when your own body starts bracing for a conversation before your brain even catches up. The escalation. Then came the farm trip. They announced it like it was already decided. They wanted to visit several local farms to interview farmers about sustainable agriculture practices, for a group project on a topic that, generously, needed maybe a paragraph on sourcing. This wasn't research. This was a pilgrimage. And it was going to eat 3 full days out of a week we did not have to spare, with a deadline breathing down our necks like a countdown clock nobody could pause. I sat there doing the math in my head. 3 days. Gone. For farm visits that, best case, would produce a few quotes we could have found in an article in 20 minutes. I remember the exact feeling in my chest when they laid out the plan. That tightening, that here we go again sensation. Because I already knew how this would play out. They'd have their little ethical field trip, feel very good about themselves, and I'd be the one left holding the actual project together while they were off communing with livestock. So for the first time in the entire project, I pushed back. I'm not going, I told them, keeping my voice level even though my pulse wasn't. You 2 go if you want, but I've already been carrying more than my share here. I'm not spending 3 days of a crunch week on something that isn't going to move the needle on our grade. I braced for the guilt trip, the disappointed sighs, the lecture about commitment and collaboration. It didn't come. They were. And I have to be fair here. Actually pretty understanding about it. No argument, no passive-aggressive dig. Just a nod and a, that's fine, we'll handle it. Which should have felt like a win. It didn't. Because I knew exactly what handling it meant. They left the following week. 3 days, just like they'd planned, wandering fields and talking to farmers about crop rotation while I sat at my desk, laptop open, doing the actual research that would make up the bulk of our final report. I watched the clock. I watched my own to-do list grow while theirs, presumably, involved fresh air and a sense of moral accomplishment. When the final report came together, their farm trip, the thing that ate 3 full days, amounted to a single footnote. One paragraph. Out of a document I had spent that same time filling, line by line, citation by citation, alone. I remember staring at that footnote for a long moment. 3 days of my life spent picking up their slack, reduced to one paragraph they contributed themselves. There's a specific kind of anger that doesn't look like anger from the outside. It's quiet. It sits in your jaw. You keep typing, keep working, keep being professional, because the deadline is close and blowing up now helps no one. But somewhere in the back of your mind, a little account is being kept. I told myself it didn't matter. We were almost done. Why make a big deal out of it now? So I let it go. Mostly. The turning point. Here's something I've learned about myself since then. I don't do confrontation well. I never have. When someone disrespects me, I don't yell. I don't send the scathing text. I go quiet and I go thoughtful. And thoughtful is far more dangerous than angry, because angry burns out. Thoughtful plans. Somewhere between that footnote and the final week of the project, an idea started forming. Not a plan yet, just a seed. A little voice that said, you don't have to make a scene to get satisfaction. You just have to make sure they never forget you. And I had exactly the tool for the job. See, I have a brownie recipe. I'm not exaggerating when I say it's the best one I've ever had. Dense, fudgy, the kind of moist that makes people close their eyes on the first bite. I've been making these for years, tweaking them, perfecting them. Every other brownie I've had since developing this recipe has been a letdown. Store-bought, bakery, some other homemade attempt. All of it pales. I didn't decide to weaponize dessert out of some grand strategy. It started smaller than that. We'd agreed to close out the project with a potluck, the kind of forced fun tradition group projects love to end on. Everyone brings something homemade. And as soon as I heard homemade, I already knew what I was bringing. The execution. The day of the potluck, I walked in with a full tray of those brownies, still slightly warm, the smell alone enough to turn heads. I set it down on the table next to somebody's slightly sad vegetable platter and somebody else's store-bought cookies, and I watched. The first person to try one didn't say anything at first, just chewed, went very still, and then looked up like they'd had a religious experience. Words spread across the room fast. People who'd barely spoken to me all semester were suddenly at my elbow. Wait, did you make these? Oh my God, these are insane. By the end of the potluck, the tray was scraped clean. Not a crumb left. People were literally running fingers along the pan. And then, predictably, satisfyingly, came the requests. You have to send me this recipe. No way, I need this. Please. Seriously, these are the best brownies I've ever had in my life. I smiled. I said, of course, I'll send it tonight. I want you to sit with that moment for a second, because this is the part where the whole thing clicked into place for me. These were the same two people who spent weeks making me feel small for eating a sandwich, for driving a car, for not sharing their exact worldview. The same two people who vanished for 3 days and left me to finish the real work, then reduced my effort to a footnote. And now here they were, practically begging me for something that came entirely from my hands, my time, my effort. They wanted a piece of the one thing about me they hadn't already tried to make me feel guilty for. So I said I'd send it, and I never did. Oh, I totally forgot. I'll send it tonight, I'd say, when someone followed up. Then nothing. A few days later, sorry, it's been so busy. I'll get it to you this weekend. Then silence again. I got very good, very quickly, at sounding sincere while doing absolutely nothing. The payoff. We finished the project not long after. Grades came back. Good ones, better than we probably deserved given how the workload actually broke down. We shook hands, said the obligatory, great working with you, and went our separate ways, the way group project teammates do, relieved to never be assigned together again. I assumed that was the end of it. It wasn't. Every so often, and I mean years later, my phone buzzes with a message from one of them, different context each time, a holiday, a random catch-up. And somewhere in the message, almost always, hey, random, but do you still have that brownie recipe? Those were seriously the best brownies I've ever had. Every single time I read it, I feel a small private smile spread across my face, and I do not respond to that part of the message. Looking back, I don't think what I did was some grand act of justice. It's petty. I'll fully admit that. But sometimes the punishment doesn't need to fit the crime. It just needs to fit you. I'm not a confrontational person. I was never going to send an angry text or call them out at that potluck. But I could control one small thing: whether they ever got to taste that again. And honestly, knowing they're out there, years later, still chasing a recipe they'll never get, that's about as sweet as the brownies themselves, Dot. If this story hit that petty satisfaction spot for you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments. What's the smallest, pettiest revenge you've ever pulled off? The kind that still makes you smile years later? Drop it below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe, because there are plenty more where this came from. See you in the next one.